These are the homework answers for the 2-1-2 homework assignment. So first question says, explain the difference between an accurate sketch and a careful graph. Well, an accurate sketch to me has some points but a careful graph has several points, and it's done like on graph paper, and it's very carefully done, so you can actually see most of the points that are on the graph. Problem number 2 in this homework says, if p of x equals x squared plus 5x minus 6, find first where p of x intersects the y-axis. So the first thing that I did for this is I figured out where it would intersect the y-axis. So you just plug in 0 for x. So we're going to do 0 squared plus 5 times 0 minus 6. So we ended up with negative 6. So the it intersects the y-axis is 0, negative 6. Then where does it intersect the x-axis? That's a little more complicated. You have to factor it. So you could box and diamond it, and you'd end up with x minus plus 6, x minus 1. So then you know that it intersects at negative 6, positive 1, or negative 6, 0, 1, 0 would be the points of intersection for the x-axis. So then it says, find the intercepts of q of x and compare them to the graph. So we know that the x-intercepts, so for a different graph, x squared plus 5x, we want to find the intercepts of. So we could pull out an x and get x plus 5. So we know that the intercepts are at 0, 0 and at negative 5, 0. And then the y-intercept, if we plugged in 0 for x, we get 0. So these are the x-intercepts. The y-intercept is at 0, 0 as well. So then if we compared it, we know that it's 6 units lower. Okay. So then part D says, subtract them. So we start with p of x and we get x squared plus 5x minus 6 minus x squared minus 5x. So x squared minus x squared is 0. 5x minus 5x is 0. So the correct answer is just negative 6. Problem number 18 says solve for z in each equation below. So this one I actually had to look up a little bit more about how we do these problems. So what you have to do is first you have to make them so that they have the same bases for there. So I know that 4 and 8, I can get both of them with 2. So I rewrite 4 as 2 to the 2 times z is equal to 2 to the third power. So I still have 4 and I still have 8. I just rewrote them differently. So now I know that 2z equals 3. I can just solve. So z equals 3 over 2. So I'm going to do the same thing in part B. I'm going to change them so they're both 2. So I get 2 to the second power times 2z over 3 equals 2 to the third power z plus 2. So now I know that I have 2, it's really 4z over 3. So 4z over 3 equals, if I distribute, 3z plus 6. So then I'm going to multiply everything by 3. So now I'm going to get 4z equals 9z plus 12. So I get negative 5, sorry, not 12, 18. 9z, so I subtract from both sides, I end up with negative 5z equals 18, so I divide by negative 5. So in this problem, I'm going to write it up here, z equals negative 18 over 5. For 3, I don't have to change the 3, but I can rewrite the 81. So I have 3 to the z is equal to 3 to the 4 times 2. So z equals 8. This problem. And then the last one, I can rewrite the 25 to have a base of 5. So I get 5 z plus 1 divided by 3 equals 5 to the second power times 1 over z. So then I'm going to get z plus 1 over 3 equals 2 over z. So to do this problem, I'm going to cross multiply. So I'm going to get z squared plus z equals 6. So z squared plus z minus 6 equals 0. So I'm going to factor. I get z plus 2 times, actually, sorry, z minus 2 times z plus 3. So then my answers are 2 and negative 3. Okay. Next one, still dealing with exponents. For this one, I have to figure out what, remember my rules for fractional exponents. I know that anything to a fraction is really the root of it. So like if I raise it to a half, I'm really taking the square root. If I raise it to a fourth, I'm really taking a fourth root. So in part A, the first thing that I have to do is get rid of the negative sign. So I rewrite it as 81 to the 1/4, which is really the fourth root of 81, which happens to just be 3. For B, the first thing I have to do is get rid of the negative exponents, so I drop them into their denominator. So I rewrite it as 1 over x squared y to the 4th, and that's actually my answer. For C, I'm going to start by getting rid of the negative exponents by putting them in the denominators, and then by multiplying a couple things out. So for the first part, I have 2x to the negative 2 is going to go in the denominator, but 16x squared y is going to stay in the numerator. So I'm going to have 16x squared y. I know that that half means that I'm taking the square root of it, divided by 2x squared. So what I can do is I can then start to simplify things. So I know that 16x squared are perfect squares, and y is not, so I can actually take them out of my square root and get 4x, leave the y inside. So then I get 2x to the second power, so it's really 4x squared. So then a couple things cancel. The 4's cancel out. The x's, I get an x taken out, so my final answer is actually the square root of y over x. Problem number 20 talks about Daniela and Key and Duan going to the movies and them getting a deal. So to do this, I did two different equations. In the first one, it says they'll get free movie tickets if they each buy a large popcorn. So I made the popcorn x, so I did 3x plus they each buy a large soda, 3y, equals $22.50. So then for the second week, it was 3, they spent, they each got a large drink, but they shared a large popcorn, and each one of them paid $8 this time. So I have 3x plus y equals, they paid a $37.50 minus the $24 that it cost them each to get in. So then, just so I can do that a little quicker, I end up with having to multiply this by a negative number so I can get them to cancel out. I get 3x plus 3y equals $22.50. A negative 3x minus y, and it ended up equaling at $13.50, negative $13.50. So now when I add my two and I use the elimination method, I end up with 2y equals, what did I get 2y to equal? 2y ends up equaling 9, dividing by 2, so I know that y equals $4.50, which is my popcorn. So I'm just going to write it down here. My popcorn equals 450. And then when I plugged it back in, not going to go through the whole process, but I ended up getting that my drink cost $3. So the reason I can write in part B is that part B said, did you write two equations? And yes, I did. So I can actually just skip part B. Okay. Problem number 221 says, plot each pair of points and find the distance between them. Give answers in both square root form and as a decimal approximation. So I'm just going to write out the answers for this one. I'm not going to show all my work. But for A, I knew that the y's were 11 apart and the x's were 5 apart. So I just did 5 squared plus 11 squared equals c squared. When I figured that out, I ended up with the square root of 146, which is about 12.1. For B, I found they were 9 apart for one of the points and 8 for the other. So I ended up with the square root of 145, which equals about 12. So several people got the square roots but didn't do the approximation, so it ended up being wrong. This one, they're 5 apart for both points actually. So you end up getting the square root of 50, which is approximately 7.1. Make sure you have both the square root and the decimal. Then it says write the distance you found in part C in a simplified square root form. So I'm taking the square root of 50, and what I'm really trying to do to it is figure out what square roots are perfect squares that I can multiply together to get 50. So I know that I can find the square root of 25 times the square root of 2. So then I just say it's 5 times the square root of 2, and that's my final answer. Problem 22 says the amount of profit in millions made by Scandal Math, a company that writes math problems based on tabloids. Articles can be found by this equation. P of n equals negative n squared plus 10n, where n is the number of textbooks sold in millions. Find the maximum profit. So I graphed this equation, and then I just looked for my vertex, and it turned out the vertex was 525. Which means that n is equal to 5. It says find the maximum profit, 5 million, and the maximum profit would be 25. Problem 23, it says our friend is taking algebra and is at a different school where they're not allowed to use graphing calculators, and wants us to explain to her how to graph the function in y equals 2 groups of x plus 3 to the second power minus 8 without using a calculator and without making an xy table. So what you needed to explain to her that you'd said whether the parabola should open up or down and how the shape is related to the shape of y equals x squared. So first we could say I know the vertex is going to be -3, -8. Okay, because it's within the equation. I know it's going to open up, and it's got a stretch of 2, which is going to make it skinnier. Then it says, your friend also needs to know how to find the x and y intercepts. Show how to find them without having to draw an accurate graph or using a graphing calculator. So to find the y-intercept, we just plug in. We're just going to replace 0 with the x in the graph, and it ends up being -8. So the y-intercept is 0, -8. And to find the x-intercepts, we just set them equal to y. So we would do 0 equals 2 groups of x plus 3 squared minus 8. So we'd add 8 to both sides. So we get 8 equals 2 groups of x plus 3 squared, divide by 2. So we end up getting 4. So 4 equals x plus 3 squared. Now we can use our square root property. We get plus or minus 2 equals x plus 3. So subtract 3. So now I have -3 plus 2, or -3 minus 2. So I know my intercepts are -1, 0.